So there's a lot of science behind exactly why we are proceeding the way we are proceeding in teaching you how your mind works, how your emotions work, what exactly yourself is from your mind's perspective, because that plays into absolutely every reaction that you have on the planet. That's why we're doing all this stuff, because it raises your levels of inner peace. It raises your levels of happiness. It raises your levels of joy. It decreases your levels of stress. It increases your health. It increases your mind health. It increases your ability to control your life and how you react to things on a day-to-day basis. There's a whole bunch of awesome shit that comes from this podcast, and you only get it here. Hey, how the hell are you? Hope things are well for you guys. I'm Sean Webb. I'm going to be your guide today in our little review of why this podcast gives you the best information that you will ever receive in your entire life, ever, period. Okay, so first, a little house cleaning. Thanks to all the new subscribers from all over the world in Taiwan, Bangladesh, India, UK, Australia. Hey, how you doing? And China. Wow, we broke through the firewall there. Isn't that awesome? Second, I wanted to say hey to the A-listers who added themselves to the subscription rolls this weekend. I won't call you out by name. I understand. I dig privacy. But hey, to the butterfly who is dreaming that she is an entertainment icon. Hey, how you doing? Good to see you. Welcome. Okay, so let's talk about why this podcast gives you guys the most awesome, powerful information you will ever receive in your entire life ever, period. Okay. There's been a lot of development in the world of neuroscience in the last number of years, and it has shone a light on a lot of the darkness that we did not understand about the brain and how it works. And we can use that information to help us understand how the mind works. Now, I'll explain the difference between brain and mind in my book, Stuck in Bliss. There is a delineation, and there's a delineation that most scientists actually agree upon. The brain is not the complete overseer of the mind. The mind isn't a complete subset of the brain, although it obviously does have a hand-in-hand relationship and does have a large influence both on each other, because you can use the mind to change the brain. Of course, the brain helps create the mind, etc. But understanding these two and how they play together and how they work is critical to our life's happiness, because our mind creates all of the turmoil that we would ever experience in our entire life. And so if we can get in there and we start to turn the dials and turn that stuff off that can create havoc and ruin our day, then all of a sudden our life becomes an amazing, awesome adventure, regardless of what's going on in our lives and regardless of what our life situation is. Now, there's a lot of really cool science that has popped up in the last number of years to help us prove this. In fact, we have an approach here that we explain how the mind works. We show you how your mind works with those things that matter to you and that are critical to you and to your happiness individually. We help you point those things out and diagram those out. And it's at the point of understanding that you can start to take control of your own mind and how it works, and especially how it works under the covers. Now, we start with emotions, and we start with understanding the mind and watching the mind, a little bit of mindfulness, etc. And it turns out that neuroscience suggests that that is a huge, awesome turbo button on the path to inner peace. In that, in 2007, and many studies that have replicated it thereafter, Matt Lieberman at UCLA discovered that putting a cognitive process to your emotional process downregulates the amygdala, which is kind of the negative emotional center of your brain, or at least has a large role to play in forming those negative emotions in the brain. And what he found is that when you put people in an fMRI and you have a controlled group and you just let them look at these emotionally evoking images, these sounds, these whatevers, they measure the brain, and the amygdala has a certain amount of reactivity. Well, at the point that you then put another group in the fMRI and you start telling them, just say the word of the emotion that represents the emotion you're feeling, seeing, or is being represented, etc., the amygdala immediately starts to downregulate. And I'm talking about immediately, like within seconds and to a substantial degree. Now, what happens when the amygdala downregulates the negative emotion? It's not like you're repressing the emotion. It's not like it's going away. It's being processed. It's being flushed through the system. The brain is then being told, hey, I understand, everything's okay, your conscious awareness comes into a cognitive process to say, okay, that's anger, that's sadness, that's whatever. And then it starts to, your brain says, okay, I've given you the emotion, you're cognizing the emotion, you're putting conscious attention to the emotion, and you're doing something about it, so I can now downregulate, okay? What we have done in explaining how the emotions exactly work in your subconscious and in your brain and your mind, not to use those words interchangeably, but they kind of go hand in hand when we're talking about emotional processing on a subconscious level. When you understand the variables inside your existence, inside your mind, inside your version of your sense of self, which is a custom thing that only you have out of the 7 billion people on the planet. That's what makes you an individual, but you can map that out and you can understand it and you can understand why certain things push your buttons the way they do. When you understand that process and you can start to see your emotions come to be as they come to be in the moment that they're coming to be, that puts a cognitive process to the emotional process like it's on steroids. It's more than saying, oh, I'm angry, or I'm sad, oh, I'm fearful about that, or that makes me nervous, or whatever. It's more than being mindful about it. It's putting a cognitive process in place about the emotional processes going on, which is subconscious. But at that point, your amygdala starts to downregulate immediately. Okay, and to a major degree. Now, what happens over time, there's this thing called plasticity. Plasticity was something that was discovered maybe about 10, 15 years ago when neuroscience discovered that the brain wasn't static. And it constantly changes, because we used to think, you get your brain and we hope you get a lucky one. Come on, 7. And if you got a lucky one and your brain works well, then awesome. That's it. You've won the lottery. If you didn't get a brain that works the way you want it to, then tough luck. You're just stuck with it. Well, we know that's false now. We know the brain can be changed in form and function based on how we use it. And that's what's called neuroplasticity. It's why when we start to practice baseball, or we start to practice crossword puzzles, or we start to practice anything, is why we get better at them, because those circuits starting to strengthen of the circuits that we're using, and the ones that we're not using start to atrophy. It's a natural conservation of energy science thing inside the brain. And the brain can be trained to a massive degree. They've had independent brain cells in a petri dish trained to keep time within 2 hours of starting them on this training, to where they start to keep time to this rhythm, to this beat, based on this interaction that they set up in this lab. 2 hours, your brain cells can change and adapt to do different things that you wish them to do. And over time, those things start to become more, quote unquote, unconscious. They start to happen without your effort, because just like Chipper Jones, I met Chipper Jones a few times in my life. We played cards a couple times. In the latter part of his career, he's a very famous baseball player. He's a Hall of Fame baseball player, no doubt. He told me, he said, look, these guys are throwing softballs down the pipe. And so, from his point of view, his body was so trained to be able to take a swing and hit a baseball that's running at 96 to 100 miles an hour. He wasn't having any issue with it at all, because his muscle memory, and because the circuits in his brain know after a number of years exactly what a good fastball looks like, exactly what a tricky curveball is gonna look like, and where he can pull his swing up. He understands exactly what's going on, not from a conscious level, because the amount of time that it takes for a pitcher to release the ball, and the ball's in the catcher's mitt, is like 0.4 seconds. So it's like you have zero reaction time at all. So you have to entirely turn over the reaction of that pitcher to your body. You don't have time to think about it. And so that's exactly what plasticity does. Over time, when you start to use your brain in a certain way, it starts to do things for you automatically. Now, when you're starting to talk down regulation of your negative shit, okay, that's huge. That's huge. Because at the point that plasticity can then take over and start to downregulate your negative emotion, your negative reactions, your negative perceptions, then your mind stops giving you that negative shit, and you don't have to deal with it as much anymore than you had previously. And so that's what this whole understanding of our emotions, the reason that you feel better when you understand exactly what it was that made you angry, exactly what it was that made you sad, exactly what it was that made you fearful. The reason that you feel better is because your brain is shutting down the negative shit in your mind. Now, what does that do for us? Well, from a health perspective, let's start with we live a longer life. Which is scientifically proven. When your cortisol levels and your stress levels go down, your telomeres, which are the kind of the plastic tips of the DNA on the end of your DNA, they get longer, which means, cell replication, when your DNA is replicated, basically it starts to lose bits off the end. And when it starts to lose bits off the end and gets down to the critical point of, hey, this information is important because there's extra pieces of protein on the end of your DNA that are designed to fall off, just so that, it's spurious information that you can fall off, you can lose it, and your cell gets its entire DNA. But when the point that it starts to fray down to getting into the good DNA bits, that's when you start to get sick and die. Well, these telomeres are these tassels on the end of your shoelace type thing, that little plastic thing. It's a protector that helps the DNA not fray as much. Well, when you're talking about lowering your cortisol levels, lowering your stress levels, that has been shown in scientific studies to lengthen your telomeres, and your telomeres are directly proportional to your length of life. So let's talk about that. Next, let's talk about your cognitive health. Let's talk about cortisol levels and norepinephrine levels killing your brain cells, because that's exactly what it does. When your cortisol levels spike, your cognitive functions, your higher cognitive functions, shut down. So let's talk about not using your higher cognitive functions on a regular day-to-day basis. If you're feeling stress on a day-to-day basis, they're shutting down, and they're atrophying, and they're dying. That's not good for your health or your brain health or your cognition later on in life. If you want to stave off things like dementia and Alzheimer's and yada, 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 stress levels are going to be critical in being able to manage that stuff moving forward. And so when we're talking about learning our emotions, learning how our mind works, learning the crap that exists in our head so that we can sweep it away and break that whole process in our head, now we're talking about increases in health. We're talking about increases in cognitive health and cognition and thinking and the ability to get into this world and do something with it based on a proactive awesomeness that takes over your life versus a reactive, holy shit, what's coming at me next perspective. Okay? Now, let's shift gears for a second. Let's talk about understanding the self and understanding our existence. Meditation is this thing that you all should be doing, by the way. But meditation has been this thing that people have talked about for centuries. In fact, all the godheads of the major religions talked about religion. Jesus sat in the desert for 40 days meditating, right in the Bible. Muhammad said 1 hour of contemplation is better than 1,000 years of worship. The Buddha, of course, was a big proponent of meditation because of what it does for you. What it does is it creates this space within you that allows you to watch your mind, to watch your existence, to watch your body, and understand that there's a delineation there. There's a line of demarcation where there is awareness versus your body and its operation, its actions, it's including your thoughts and some of the things that happen in your head. There is a line of demarcation. There's a separation there between your awareness and your thought processes. And what that does for you when you hit that point of noticing those things and seeing those things, all of a sudden you realize, holy shit, I am not entirely this body that exists in the mirror. I am not entirely these thoughts that I'm having. I am not entirely the pains and the aches and the whatever that this body is experiencing. I am not the sum of these parts that I see when I look in the mirror or look in the reflection of the pond or whatever I'm looking at. Look as I watch myself on this video. I am not this person. And that's what a meditation can do for you, is that it creates that separation of that space of awareness that, oh, I am not this thing that's going on. So, okay, so what am I? And then that starts you down this path of discovery of this awesomeness that, once that starts flowering and once you start to be able to experience that on a bigger, deeper basis, then you expand consciousness. Well, we're doing it from the opposite side. We're coming in it from the brain saying, let's talk about this subconscious process. Let's talk about these emotions. Let's talk about what's happening in there so you can watch it as it's happening in real time. Well, what does that do? Okay, well, that creates the line of demarcation, that line of separation between awareness and what you're looking at. Now, what you're looking at is supposed to be you. What you're looking at is supposed to be your emotions, your process, your mind machinations. But the thing is, we have this meta-awareness. You can watch that from a separate location. Well, where is that location? Who's in that? What is that? What's going on there? Right? That's exactly what we're doing when we're talking about analyzing the mind, looking at our emotions, looking at how things work within us, and understanding our reactions to things, is being able to create that space of awareness that is separate from the mess that's going on in here. And then all of a sudden you realize, holy crap, I'm not that mess. I'm not that mess of all this crap that has been ruining my life. So what am I? Where am I? Who am I? What is the thing that is the awareness that's watching all this stuff? And oh, by the way, because I am not this stuff, and because I see it working now, and because I'm actually able to push the buttons in the brain that help downregulate that stuff and turn it off, well, wow, now maybe I have less junk to deal with on a day-to-day basis in my search for what is that deeper existence, that awareness that is separate from all the mess that's going on in my mind. Now, there is a bonus, because there's this place that you can get to within you where you do discover that awesome, let's call it spiritual or non-mind awareness, or seemingly non-mind awareness, that opens up this awesome thing, and you start to realize that you're this amazing, immortal life energy creature that transcends, so to speak, the body, goes on beyond the body itself. Well, when you get there, it's awesome. When you get to that point of awakening, it's amazing. But then what happens is that because of the patterns of the mind, because of the plasticity of the mind that's been your worst enemy for a number of years, well, it starts to take back over again as soon as you get to that realization, and it can muddy the waters again. So on post-awakened folks, or on folks who have made a little bit of a breakthrough, what this stuff that we're doing allows that meditation does not allow, because you could meditate for years and then finally hit this space of awesome awareness and inner peace and discovery, and then have your mind take over again and be right back in the shit a month later. So what this allows, understanding the emotions from a process point of view, from a here are the variables inside your head that are making you angry, that are making you sad, that are making you fearful about things, that are making you worried, that are making your stress levels increase. Here's exactly how it works. Now that you know how it works, that stuff lowers because you're putting your cognition to the emotional process, which we've known since 2007 downregulates the negative shit in our brain. After a while, the plasticity kicks in. Well, what this allows is, after you get to that point of awesome awakening, now there is no mind taking back over process. Now you see exactly what it is in your mind that's been ruining your day. And now after you hit these little steps of awakening, now you don't have to worry about your mind taking back over, because you can chomp down and clamp down on that process of your mind ruining your life in the future. Because at the point that you understand your mind, you're able to see your mind. Every time you practice, why am I angry? Why am I sad? Why am I fearful? Why am I worrying about this? Why did I regret this? What is my sense of self? When you're able to step back and see those things from a 50,000-foot view, all of a sudden they hold no sway on you anymore, or they certainly don't hold as much sway as they used to. Okay, so there's a lot of science behind exactly why we are proceeding the way we are proceeding in teaching you how your mind works, how your emotions work, what exactly your self is from your your mind's perspective, because that plays into absolutely every reaction that you have on the planet. That's why we're doing all this stuff, because it raises your levels of inner peace. It raises your levels of happiness. It raises your levels of joy. It decreases your levels of stress. It increases your health. It increases your mind health. It increases your ability to control your life and how you react to things on a day-to-day basis. There's a whole bunch of awesome shit that comes from this podcast, and you only get it here because this is the only podcast and book in the world who is explaining to you how the emotions work in the mind. We're going to be teaching it to a bunch of other folks, which is awesome, because I would love to be able to hand this off and spread it around and have everybody take control of their emotional landscape and their mind and how it works, etc. Because that's going to change the world. That's literally going to change the world. It's going to change how people treat each other. It's going to change how nations treat each other. It's going to change the fact that we lob bombs on each other when we disagree, in our ideas or ideals, or methods of government, or methods of monetary system. Being able to take control of that stuff, that's going to change the world. So I want to spread this as quickly and as far as possible. But right now, this is it. This is the only place. This is the only place that provides it, and I want to provide it for free as long as possible. And I'll provide other mechanisms of delivery for you guys to be convenient for you, but this is why we do what we do, and why I do what I do. Do I do it for my health? Well, yeah, actually, I do. I have a float tank in my office that helps me dive into the mind so that I can understand it, and so that I'm not thrown off my even keel ever. I want you guys to have immense control over your life, because what happens at that point is your happiness level, your joy level, your freedom, your liberation. That's exactly what we're talking about. Liberation from the bullshit is what we're talking about. So I want you to have that. Share this with folks and let them know that we're going to be firing off Mind Hacking Happiness. It's going to be a podcast. It's going to be this book. It's going to be a mobile application. It's going to be some awesome, awesome stuff that helps you take control of your life. All backed by science and neuroscience and emotion science, all proven under fMRI. Awesome stuff coming. Hope things are well for you guys. I'll talk to you soon. Peace.